Hello, it's Big Cheds. I'm back with another chapter of my Battles with Cancer, a candid patient and caregiver's memoir. I was a cancer patient and a caregiver for my mother, and I write about my experience here in this book as a way to help other people. And I'm recording the entire book for free on YouTube at Cheds Trading. I've also published two other books, Trading Quotes, Trading Wisdom, available on Amazon. But this book is the focus today. I'm one chapter at a time. This next chapter is Everything I Said Was Wrong. We just found out that Mom's cancer had spread. Everything I said was wrong. As I sat there looking at Mom, I could not shake myself out of the shock, and I kept thinking about the fact that everything I told her before was wrong. All those expectations I'd helped to set about the cancer being mostly gone from her body were false. All those times I confidently told her that this was merely a follow-up treatment, using fancy medical words from my own experience as a patient to calm her down, were wrong. Frustratingly, I had told her so many times that the hardest part was defining her enemy and that we had already done that. But it turned out that we had not defined anything. In addition, I kept telling her that the scan would not reveal anything new and that we knew exactly what we were dealing with. And yet again, I was completely mistaken. I was wrong. Faced with this new reality, I was extremely confused, but one thing I knew for sure was that I knew absolutely nothing about cancer, and that scared the hell out of me. We thanked the doctor for her help, and then we left to forge on and start Mom's treatment. As we strode towards the treatment area, I placed my hand on Mom's arm to let her know that I was there for her and would make sure that she was okay. Mom's name was called a few minutes later, and we followed a nurse back to the room that Mom would be sharing with 3 other patients. And to my pleasant surprise, I discovered that she had a window view. I found that having one helped me to relax during my chemotherapy sessions. Mom sat down and tried to settle into the patient chair and flashed me a brave smile. Just as soon as we had started to relax, a social worker came by to visit Mom and to spend time with her before the chemotherapy session began. This well-caffeinated woman was in her late 30s with red, shaggy hair and a finely freckled face. Mom expressed to her that she was in complete shock and was unable to process what had just happened. And I could relate to what she was saying because I felt the same way myself. We had both initially thought that Mom would only have to face 12 sessions, and now we were dealing with the possibility of chemotherapy for the rest of her life. The social worker attempted to soothe Mom by telling her that she would find comfort in the pace and structure of the treatments after a few sessions, and that idea seemed to make Mom feel a little bit better. As we began to wrap up that visit, a nurse came in with Mom's first chemotherapy medicine, folinic acid. The nurse asked Mom to confirm her name and birthday and then scanned the bag of medicine into the computer before hooking it up to the IV machine. Next, she called in another nurse to double check and sign off on the medication so she could start that drip. When I went through chemo, each time a new drug had been administered to me, I had 2 different nurses asking me the same questions again and again, but I did not mind that as I thought it was a smart safety precaution. The first drug began, and I sat with Mom, patiently waiting and watching to see how she responded. We really didn't speak much initially as that medicine made its way through her system, and I studied her face to see if she was in any pain or discomfort. And from what I could tell, she seemed to be doing well. Mom read from a magazine while I scanned the news on my phone, and from time to time we made small talk as that bag of medicine continued to drip, drip, drip. A light as feather lady stopped by a little while later, and she explained that she was the nutritionist. Though this is not the same nutritionist I had met during my first chemo session, this woman had a similar healthy and down to earth vibe about her. And she wanted to talk about changes mom would need to make to her diet and to be available to answer any questions we had about how to plan her meals going forward. This lady stressed just how important it was to eat the right things so mom's body could recover from each session of chemotherapy properly. Mom listened intently to the nutritionist, and when it was her time to speak, she started to break down, completely overwrought with emotion. Mom expressed that she was overwhelmed by everything that was going on and she could not process any more information. Mom then told the nutritionist her whole story from start until finish. This lady, the nutritionist, did a great job listening to mom and playing the same role that the social worker had just 30 minutes prior. I thought that was a nice touch and reflected on just how well the hospital hires and trains its staff. As the nutritionist continued to converse with mom, I watched and listened carefully, and soon enough, we were startled by the sound of the IV machine beeping as that bag of medicine finished. This strange sound was not too dissimilar from that of a truck backing up, designed to get the attention of the nursing staff. When I first heard that sound, I had an almost PTSD like reaction, flashing back to my own chemotherapy treatment. That sound is so strong and jarring that it's hard to get out of my mind. And it was one of the most challenging parts about being there with mom during her chemotherapy sessions. The nutritionist must have taken that beeping as a cue because a little bit after that, she wrapped up things with mom and then left to go meet with another patient. As the nutritionist left, I told mom that I needed to get up and go for a walk to clear my head so I could find some perspective. And she said that she understood and encouraged me to take a break, ever conscious of what I was going through emotionally, even as she was the one in the patient's chair. Leaving her room, I put on my headphones to listen to some music, making my way down the hall and out the door to the reception area. After entering the elevator and watching people pile in after me, it dawned on me that I was going to be spending a lot of time at the hospital in the coming months. Just when I thought I was done with that place, I had been pulled right back in, squished inside an elevator with 10 other people. All throughout my radiation treatments, I had counted down the days when I could walk away from that place and not have to return, except for the occasional appointment. And now every fiber in my being yearned to disconnect emotionally from that place. And though that would not be possible anymore, I was heading rapidly in the opposite direction, now as a cancer caregiver. Upon exiting the elevator, I stepped out onto the ground floor and I saw a familiar face. One of the nurses who took care of me during my chemotherapy treatments. Coincidentally, this was the same nurse that I ran into after getting my pneumonia shot a few weeks prior, so it was fun to see her again. She was a disarmingly friendly nurse who grew up in a nearby town, and she was about my age. At first, she was happy to hear that I was doing so well, and again remarked that I seemed to be recovering nicely. When I told her about my mother's condition, her face turned south. She was visibly affected by that news and offered me her deepest sympathies. And then she asked me some follow-up questions about mom's condition, such as what type of treatment the doctor was prescribing. I explained that the doctor had prescribed FOLFOX chemotherapy and had recently added bevacizumab to treat the cancer more aggressively. The nurse remarked that in her experience, bevacizumab was being added to many chemotherapy regimens as it had been shown to be highly effective. Hearing that made me feel a little bit better, because I was desperate in that moment for any small piece of good news. It was clear that I was going to have to re envision what the world looked like now that my mother had cancer and that it was stage 4 metastatic rather than stage 3 and under control. I would have to accept this new paradigm and I would have to examine why everything I thought I knew before was wrong. It was not a good feeling to discover that I had been so utterly mistaken about everything. I was starting to feel like the cancer was in control and might win in the end over Mom and I. Returning from a nice long walk, it was great to see that Mom was in good spirits. She asked me to grab her some crackers from the refreshment station, and that made me happy since that meant that she had an appetite. On the way to get the crackers, I glanced to my right and I saw an older lady sitting by herself, hooked up to the IV machine while receiving treatment. My first thought was that it was sad that she didn't have anyone with her, and I remembered just how lonely and isolated I often felt while getting my chemotherapy. Even with my wife sitting right beside me, no one should have to go through something as emotionally and physically difficult as chemotherapy alone. I returned with the crackers just as the nurse was changing Mom's chemotherapy medicine, and she had finished the second drug, oxaliplatin. My sister showed up a few minutes later to check in on Mom, and it was good to see her. Mom has always leaned on her for support, and when she walked in the room, I could tell that it meant a lot as Mom perked up and beckoned for my sister to give her a hug. Mom explained that she was still processing all the news from the meeting with her medical oncologist earlier that day, but was doing better by the minute. She then fired off a flurry of questions to my sister about her medical case, and my sister tried her best to answer by recounting what the doctor had told us just a couple of hours prior. I knew that most of this was repeat information, but that was okay, as Mom had likely not absorbed much of what was said earlier. Mom continued to talk about how the idea of having chemotherapy indefinitely was more than she could bear, and asked my sister if it was possible that she could be cured one day. My sister responded that it is possible that she would be cured, but for the vast majority of patients, this type of chemotherapy will continue as long as the patient is alive. Soon enough, it was time for my sister to go as she needed to see her own patients. So she bid us farewell and kissed Mom on the forehead before leaving. Mom resumed reading her magazine, and I returned to my phone to scan the news. However, I was unable to get out of my mind all the familiar sounds around me that invoked memories of my chemotherapy treatment. The slow, steady grind of the IV machine, the nurses talking, and the ambient noise from the other caregivers talking to patients all brought me back to a difficult place emotionally. I wanted to be calm and to be steady for Mom as she was the one receiving chemotherapy that day, but it was really hard. I kept going back to when I was the one hooked up to the IV drip. It was now time for the third medicine, bevacizumab, and I was uncomfortably presented with the familiar sight of a nurse wearing a hospital gown and surgical gloves, preparing to administer a chemotherapy drug so potent that it would cause major damage to human tissue if spilled. During my chemo sessions, I found that concept jarring. It reminded me that I was so sick that I needed a dangerously powerful medicine to heal me. The last hour went by quickly, and before we knew it, the nurse came in to prepare Mom to go home. She gave her some instructions for the rest of the week, including coming back that Friday evening to disconnect the pump from her port. The pump was a black and gray box that mom would carry around with her for the next 46 hours as that machine slowly delivered the 5FU or fluorouracil into her bloodstream. As we gathered our belongings, I gave mom a reassuring smile, helping her to put on her coat so we could depart. Now we were ready to leave the hospital with one chemotherapy session under our belt. There was a palpable sense of relief as we pulled back into my driveway, as we were both happy to be home and ready for mom to start recovering. I helped her get out of the car and into the house, much in the same way as I had after her surgery, except this time, mom was able to get onto the recovery bed all by herself. As she laid down and settled into the bed, I settled into my chair at the computer desk, ready for a long evening of watching over her. My expectation was that she would stay for at least a few days as we saw how she handled the nausea, but after an hour or so, mom got right up out of bed and declared that she wanted to go back to her place. Hearing mom say that caught me completely off guard, but she sure seemed sure of herself, and I had to trust that she knew what was best for her. Mom explained that some of the shock of going to the hospital was starting to wear off. She also said that since the effects of the chemotherapy had not hit her yet, she was feeling cogent enough to drive. She really wanted to be home where she had all her belongings and where she felt the most comfortable. Being satisfied with that answer, I wished her good luck. I gave her a big hug and a kiss, and then I helped her get back into the car. This is my battles with cancer. The next chapter will be Train Came Off the Tracks. We're heading into a tough part in the book for me, but I'm going to push through it. This is my battles with cancer, a patient and caregiver's candid memoir. I'm a cancer survivor. I had lymphoma. I beat my cancer, and then my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and I took care of her. I wrote about my book as a way to help myself, but also to help other people. And it's published on Amazon, but I'm doing the whole thing here for free on YouTube, one chapter at a time. I'm also the author of Trading Quotes and Trading Wisdom, both available on Amazon. Big Cheds on Twitter, Cheds Trading on YouTube. And folks, I'll be back with another chapter soon. Thank you so much.